We are back on episode 2, season 2, My Mayor, with former or always Fire Chief Jim Large. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
We got 5 more questions to help people continue getting to know you, the person behind the policies.
Mm-hmm.
Question number 1, what's something you become much better at in the last 5 years that would surprise your younger self?
This was probably the most thought-provoking question, I guess, of the bunch, because, having been in the fire service for so long, and learning so many lessons, I always joke about, when I was 18, I knew it all, and I've gotten progressively dumber, through life. Trying to zero in on one thing, especially in the last 5 years, I would say probably as I got near the end of my career, I don't want to say it's a patience thing, because I think I've developed patience much sooner, but it was a much more simplistic, common sense, bottom line kind of approach to things and problem solving. I saw, over the years, I'd get frustrated in meetings that took so long, and the old adage, we're going to beat the dead horse. I just got to where, okay, cut to the chase. What's the bottom line? And let's get started on solving the problem. So I think that it's a form of, I developed more patience. I didn't have a lot of patience when I was younger. I wanted everything right now. It's not that. It's switching to a more, just like I say, a simplistic, common sense, no fluff approach to things, whether it's problem solving or decision making or whatever the case may be. That's the thing that I kept coming back to, was more simplicity in decision making.
So if we dig into that a little bit, and do you feel like, is that a variation on patience, or you kind of went on the offensive with your patience and said, instead of having to be patient, I'm going to try to build a structure that's more common sense where I don't have to be as patient. Is that maybe another way to say it?
That's not, I hadn't looked at it that way, but my wife says I'm much more patient than I was when I was younger. So on that side, I don't think I've abandoned patience, but I do think it was more, we're much more, task-oriented, multitask-oriented than we used to be, whether it's social media, whatever. The demands are far greater. So I think it was more about time management probably than it was actual patience. That, let's not spend a lot of time here, just, building a widget when we know what we need to do. How do we get there? Let's do it efficiently, quickly. So it was that kind of an approach. And obviously, I saw a disappearance of common sense, if you will, over the years. It wasn't just the last 5 years. It's been eroding for quite some time. And there's a lot of different theories on why. But I always tried to bring common sense back to the table in that approach. And so I there's a little bit of patience there, but there's a little bit of time management.
Yeah. Time is the most precious thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's a question you wish more people would ask before they form an opinion?
Well, that one there is simple. Can we have a conversation? Whatever the issue is, whatever the topic is, subject, whatever you want to say, let's have a conversation before you form an opinion. Whether it's a personal thing, whether it's a policy, issue, whether it's a procedural issue, let's have a conversation before, and then form your opinion based on you've heard all sides. So I just think if people would say, even if they come to you, I believe you're whatever. Okay, let's have a conversation about it. Why you believe that? So I think it's just simply asking, can we have a conversation?
Yeah. And certainly that's one of the most damaging elements of social media, is that you can take anything, take it out of context, and attach it to a judgment. And in the micro, in those few words and those few sentences you write in that post, the internal logic can make sense. But it, when you push it into a larger context and take other people's point of views, then a lot of times it makes less sense, because there's more information stuffed in there.
100%. And, we talked about that a little bit last time, and that's so true. So true.
Tell me about a time when you've been completely wrong about someone, or even a little bit wrong about someone.
This one jumped right out at me. So this is quite some time back, though, but I was a assistant fire chief on St. Pete, and I had an opening for what was our logistics officer, resource officer, and it's a lieutenant position. And I put it out, memo, anybody interested, and I got 3 names in, and 2 of them I had worked with, and I just didn't feel like they were right for the position, and the third one was on a different shift when I was on shift, and I didn't know much about him, but I wasn't ever really impressed. I thought he was too laid back, just not in. He was a lieutenant, so he had should have had a little bit of command presence and things that I thought I expected from someone. But I had a friend of mine on the job who had worked for him said, "I think you should take a chance on this guy." And I was reluctant, but I took a chance on him. And I will tell you, to this day, I consider him a friend. One of the best decisions I ever made. I was so wrong about this person. He didn't need the kind of presence because his style and his ability to get people to, cooperate, to do things for him, everything was just, it was the perfect fit for the position. And I didn't see it. So I was 100% wrong. And I'll tell you, he was 100% good and effective and just a great choice.
Interesting. So obviously that demonstrates a couple different leadership styles. There's, the more traditional commanding presence, and then there's the more maybe collaborative, get people on the bus presence, and there's a spectrum in between. So when you think of mayor, where do you think that that position lands on that spectrum?
Well, I think mayor, fire chief, when the buck stops with a position as it does with the mayor, that's it. I think you have to have a little bit of all of those. It's situational. The leadership style is definitely situational. What is, there's times when you have to be very, quite candidly, autocratic. There's not time for, debate, consensus. A decision has to be made right now. Then there's other times when you absolutely need to sit down, have a long talk, a consensus approach, a collaboration approach. And so it really varies. It's very situational. And I think, again, a mayor needs to possess a range of leadership styles, if that's the right word, or just techniques. So you have to understand it. You have to recognize, when you're in a crisis management, it's autocratic. We don't have debates on the fire scene, for example. You can't have debates in the EOC after a hurricane. You have to make a decision, and we have to move. But on something like, let's talk about the gas plant district. On something like that, there needs to be consensus. There needs to be collaboration. There needs to be a lot of different leadership style there.
Makes sense. What's a lesson life taught you the hard way?
Oh boy, this one here. I've had a few, but the one that really sticks out. So, I graduate high school. I go and I get a job. I was working at Publix through high school. When I graduated high school, I went and got a job at Tradewinds Mobile Home Manufacturing out in Penrose Park, and had a decent salary or pay. So I had money in my pocket, living at home for about 2 weeks. And then my dad calls me in and sits me down. My dad's retired military. He did 20 plus years in the Air Force, was a World War II veteran, Korean vet. And, he retired when I was 9 years old. So they weren't, they got by, but they didn't have a lot of money and stuff. So he called me in, he sat me down, he said, "Son, what branch of the military are you going in?" I looked at him, I had my long hair and everything. I said, "I'm not going in the military." And he said, "I think you should. I think you should go in the military and get the GI Bill. And then you can go to college and hopefully make something of yourself." I said, "No, I'm not interested. Thank you." And I started to get up and he said, No, sit down. And he took out his checkbook and he wrote me a check and he handed it to me. And I said, "Is this a graduation gift?" He said, "No, that's first and last wherever you're moving. You got 2 weeks." I was floored. My mom was tearing up. I said, What do you mean? I want to stay here." He said, "It's not an option." So I started, I go over the phone, rotary dial back then. I'm dialing my friends. "Hey, who wants to move out? I need a roommate. I need help. I need, all these things." So one of my friends said he had just got hired by, at the time, Florida Power. So we rented a duplex and he lived in the neighborhood. So it was about 10 blocks from our houses and fully furnished, 165 a month. So we split it. And, I moved out and I was very disappointed in my dad and, upset a little bit. But when I look back now, it was a life lesson. I suddenly had electric bills. I suddenly had water bills. I had rent. And it was a reality check for me. It was a responsibility that I thought I could avoid maybe by staying in my parents' house. But again, I wasn't given that option. And I had wanted to be a police officer. So that's when I started pursuing a career with the city. I went down to apply for the police officer. And as I have said before, I ended up on the fire department and loved it. But I think that was probably the biggest life lesson that I got. And there were others. My dad was old school, and he taught me a lot of life lessons that I look back now. At the time, I didn't understand them, but I understand them now as an adult and as a parent.
And was he around long enough to see you and that you ended up in service? And did he feel like being in the career you ended up in was satisfied him as far as serving?
Yes, we had a strained relationship for a while, and I got on the fire department. And when I made lieutenant, I was the youngest lieutenant in the history of the department. I made it when I was 24. He came to the ceremony, and he was pretty proud. And he said, I never forget. He was from Georgia, Gainesville. He goes, his statement was, "Attaboy, son," and that sticks with me to this day.
And invite you to move back in though at that age? No.
No. I never went back. Never went back. Yep.
When nobody's asking anything of you and curiosity takes over, what rabbit hole are you most likely to disappear into?
Well, there's two. There's a pre-campaign and a post-campaign rabbit holes. So the first one, when I retired, I wanted to find something for my brain, if you will. So I decided to take up piano. So I went out and I got a piano, and I went out and I got an instructor, a very patient, very good instructor who I still go to once a week. So when I had downtime, I was looking up different things about piano playing. There's all kinds of help apps and stuff. So I would just start going into that, and that went on until I decided to get into the campaign. So once I got into the campaign, like I said, I still maintain my lessons. I still try to practice, but I'll tell you, campaign time takes away from it. I don't get to practice as much as I'd like. I'm pretty much only playing Jingle Bells and Happy Birthday right now, but I love it. It's a challenge. But now the rabbit hole is research. I wasn't a big researcher, but when I have downtime now, I'll be sitting there and something will click in my brain, and then I go to, Google or whatever website, and I just start researching whatever clicked in my brain, related to being a mayor, related to the city, related to crime, related to infrastructure, you name it. It's constant research. So that's kind of the, like I say, the rabbit hole I go down when nobody's asking anything. I'm sitting alone, and my wife says it all the time. You're married to that phone now. Now that you're in the campaign, and so even when I'm sitting at home, she sees me on it, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm looking up, the crime stats for St. Peter. I'm looking up, what's the rainfall now, and the new 20-minute rain is much heavier than, I'm learning a lot of different things." So that's how those are the two. I haven't done much piano research in recent times on different keys and songs and things like that, but I'm not giving it up.
I do think it's important to note that there are a lot of campaign slogans, but as of yet, I don't think any candidate has a campaign song. So maybe you need to get writing, get the piano out and write a campaign song. Wonderful.
Well, I'm definitely not anywhere near writing music. I'm barely understanding music. I have no background in music whatsoever. So my instructor's been very patient, not only teaching me piano, but teaching me to read music, to understand all the different terms and the symbols. He likens it to math, and he's right when you start really breaking it down. So it is, it's very challenging for the brain, and that's what I was looking for. That's the thing my wife says to me all the time. You're not happy if you don't have a challenge. And she's right. and that's part of the reason I'm running. Is we have challenges as a city, and I take them as a challenge for me as well.
Wonderful. Well, I know you're downtown, and you squeezes in between a few meetings, so I do appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to continuing the conversation on our next episode in a couple of weeks.
Okay, I look forward to it as well. This is great. This is kind of back to the second question. We're having a conversation, and that's how we get to know things and how we form an opinion. So I think what you're doing is a valuable service to the people out there, the voters, so they can listen to all six of us and hear our point of views and make an informed decision as we move into this very important election, if you will.
Agreed. Yep, that's the goal. I do appreciate you participating.